coaches. I'm here with head coach Adam Krikorian. We're here in Budapest, Hungary for the 2019 World League Super Final. And we're just hours away actually from the gold medal game against Italy. Winner tonight qualifies for the Tokyo Olympics, first qualification spot for the Tokyo Games next year. So lucky enough to sit with Coach Adam for a little bit before this game and talk a little bit about this week in general and some of the things that we've learned while we're here. Unique to this trip, behind the camera here, is our coach education manager, Drew Clute. And we've embedded him with the team this week, similar to like a Rolling Stones journalist, right? So an almost famous shout out here for everybody watching back home. But to take the opportunity to be with your team and you and your staff and really learn and absorb as much as possible as we can, so that in turn we can take that and share it with the entire country and share what we've learned here. So over the course of the week, Drew and I sat down and came with 5 takeaways that we believe we've learned from the time here. So I'd share those with you, get some thoughts on what you're doing, and then we'll go back and rest before the big game tonight.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm all for it.
I think one of the things that stands out to us, particularly in this almost 2 weeks that the team has been here, correct? A little under 2 weeks, being in Budapest the whole time, a little common training with Hungary here, and then the tournament begins. There's a level of preparation that happens before you go on this trip, and then during this trip between each games. Maybe you can speak a little bit about what kind of focus and energy you put into preparing yourself, your staff, and the team for these moments.
Well, there's a ton of preparation. I think you touched on it a little bit. Most people just see what happens here this week. I mean, the preparation starts 2 weeks ago when we first convened as a group and having an idea what this was going to look like and what we wanted it to look like. And obviously there's preparation every day. Coach Wooden said it best, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And you know, as a coach, I think we have a responsibility, and I have a responsibility to have this vision of not just how I want this whole journey to be, but how I want each practice to be, how I want each day to be, how I want each interaction with the group. And that takes a lot of preparation when you're thinking about that. You literally have to prepare for every moment of every day. A lot of times when we think of preparation, we think of preparing for teams. And scattering reports, of course, are important in this phase, but you need to prepare for literally every element of training, of strength training we do, and interactions again. That, as I said, that's an essential part of our process and our success.
When you say prepare, what are some practical things that you do for preparing while you're here? Is it just video? Is it team meetings? Is it, you know, what does it look like on a practical day-to-day basis?
Well, I think, honestly, a lot of preparation goes on in your mind. And like I always say, the best conversations are the ones you have with yourself. And I think after every single day, it is going back home, even just on a personal level, and thinking about going back to the hotel room and thinking about the things that went well and the things that didn't go well. You know, taking a moment to reflect on that day and on each individual, kind of what needs to be done. I have a journal that I keep that I'm constantly writing in the evenings, during the day, during practice, to remind myself, so I can go back, a week from now I can go back and look at those notes. The preparation also happens obviously watching video. It happens communicating with my staff and having staff conversations about what I see, what they see, and that collaboration is extremely helpful in preparing for that next practice or the next game or how we want to address something. So those are just a few examples of kind of the preparation that goes on. But it's detailed, and it's all consuming. I mean, it's, for those that are head coaches, I think everyone knows that it doesn't escape your mind ever. So it's a pretty fluid thing too throughout this entire week here.
It's funny when you're talking. One of the things that came to mind was it's a great Albert Einstein quote. He said, "If I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem, and then 5 minutes solving it."
Yeah, that's great. And that's exactly what we do. I mean, these games are only an hour long, right?
Yeah,
so you can think about it like that, in that sense. The game is an hour long. The game, in my mind, at least from a coach's standpoint, kind of takes care of itself, right? It's everything we do around the game that is the most important.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So it's really, sometimes on these trips, I think maybe what people don't see, or maybe at practice when you're home and back, is you got to be able to, I would assume, carve out space for that time to think about this. Like, how do you carve out the time and the space and the opportunity just to be able to have a clear mind to think about these things?
Well, there's so many different elements to that. I mean, you start talking about that, and it's like, yeah, I need to carve out my time in a day for myself to be able to have those personal thoughts, to be able to journal. I also need to be in the right space mentally. So everyone's different. Everyone should know what kind of gets them thinking correctly. And part of my routine is working out. I feel much better about myself. I think much clearer. Actually inspired much more when I'm working out. So for me, that's an essential part of my day. I don't do it every day, but I try to get a good 30 minutes to 60 minutes of working out and carving out some space for that to happen. But while that's happening, I'm also thinking about coaching and preparing for that next interaction or the next training as well.
So back here with Coach Krikorian, we are back from Budapest, Hungary, where the team just qualified for the Olympics at the World League Super Final. We started this process out there. 5 takeaways, 5 learnings that we had from our experience together out there. The second of which is this understanding of the high performance model. And within that high performance model, there are several aspects that are addressed from the top down that are direct impacts to performance. Things such as strength and conditioning, things such as athlete wellness, sports medicine, video, how you're staffing your team. So maybe you could speak to how this kind of team within the team within the high performance model helped you get through this last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's naive to think that our success is just based on what we do in the water. I mean, there's so many different elements. You mentioned a few: strength and conditioning, video, nutrition, psychology. And with that being said, within each element of high performance, we have different people that are in charge of that. I essentially kind of oversee it all, but I couldn't do it without the help and the support and the staff that we have that's in charge of each. And, as a head coach, it's something that I enjoy very much because sometimes you do feel like you're on an island, but when you have a team of people that you work with, that I work with, especially the type of people that I work with that are so professional and so good at what they do, it's pretty fun to kind of share that experience with, and we really rely on them to execute their job, to be able to put our athletes in the best position possible. So it's not just me coaching the team, it's sometimes our strength coach, Tim Pillow, who's in charge, or Peter Haberl, who's in charge of sports psychology, or Larney, who's in charge of sports medicine. They all have to execute their roles in order for us to have success. And the reality is that all of these things are connected, and it's similar to the game of water polo, right? It's we're not playing well in our half-court defense if we're struggling on counterattack defense. Then we're just scrambling, and it's tough to get into our half-court defensive sets. And we're struggling on our counterattack defense if we're not balanced and under control on offensively. So how each one of these elements performs has a huge impact on our success.
And so now you're really fortunate. You mentioned all these professional people. These are full-time, and some of them full-time employees. You have the United States Olympic Committee, USA Water Polo, all these things backing you up. So for me, I'm back home. I'm coaching my high school. I'm coaching my college. I'm coaching my club. Is it possible to recreate something like this without those types of resources?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, I think the hard thing will be to have the staff, as much of a staff as we have, or as big of a staff as we have. But I think you're still going to have those cogs, right, and those spokes of the wheel, so to speak, that you need to look at, and even it's helpful, even if you're in charge of each one of them, it's helpful sometimes to know the different spokes of the wheel and really evaluate each one of those. Take time to, how are we doing in video? Where do we stand? Where do we rank? How are we doing in, sports medicine? How are we doing in sports psychology? How are we doing, obviously, in the tactics? How are we doing in strength training? So you might not have the staff to have one person oversee each, and I obviously understand that, but as a head coach, you still have a responsibility for each one of those, and you still can evaluate and the amount of detail you go into each one, and maybe you have to prioritize those as well. And luckily, in our position, like you mentioned, we're supported fairly well, and they're all performing and executing at a high level. But it's still an important element to the job of coaching, no matter whether you're coaching the senior team or coaching a high school team or a club team.
And you mentioned something about using the high performance model as a lens to evaluate how you're doing, right? Evaluating performance, essentially. A few years ago, you and I did a coach education conference in Cal Berkeley, and you gave a talk about how you evaluated what the team did in 2012 in the Olympics after winning the gold medal, and then what it was going to take right after 2012 to start preparing for 2016 and performing at the highest level there. And in that talk, you talk about this model, using that as your evaluation form, right? Going piece by piece as you move forward. So that's also on our USA Water Polo high performance education channel, and encourage everyone to take a look at that. So it's the two facets of wanting to be able to create that structure in that system, but also using it as an evaluation process as well.
Yeah, and you're, after every season, or every year, or every, in my case, quad, 4 years, you're reevaluating what that looks like and how you're executing in each one of those, and it gives you a chance to, we all, as coaches, I think we evaluate our players all the time.
Right.
It's a fluid process. It's a nonstop thing, but we need to spend some time and evaluate us, our staff, and what we're doing. And quite frankly, that's actually most important, because if we don't have our stuff together, then I don't know how we're going to expect to have our athletes and their stuff together. So
good point.
It's an important process for development.
Yeah. So the third learning we had together while we were in Budapest is this idea of authenticity and humility, coming from the head coach and staff down. And I think one of the things about being accessible and authentic that we're learning from being together is when we're on the outside of this, it really does feel like, especially with all the success and with all the winning, that there's some sort of magic formula or something really different that's happening, than unique, that you're doing and the team's doing, the athletes are doing, beyond the scope of all of us, the rest of us here in America. And I think one of the things we've all learned together is that may or may not be true. And so we'd love to speak to how you're operating and how can that translate and trickle down to us in that authentic way.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, and I hear it all the time. I think some people put us on a pedestal and they think we're doing some crazy things that allow for success. The reality is, as I said earlier, I think we've had success because we do a lot of things well, and we do them well consistently, over and over and over and over again. I don't think we do anything. People come to our training or practice or sit in our meetings, I don't think that they would be blown away, but with crazy tactical information or this silver bullet that's going to change the world. It's as I always say, it's not what we do, it's how we do it that's more important. And how we do it is not just in that practice, but on a consistent basis. And that's how you develop, the right habits and skills that that are going to keep improving. It's not just doing it once or twice a week, it's doing it every single day. And so we take great pride in that consistency. And I think that's really the secret to our success, is how consistent we can be performing at a high level in anything we do. We don't do anything out of the ordinary. It's the fundamentals are the fundamentals, and they will always be important, no matter whether you're at the youngest level or the highest level. And we still spend a ton of time working on the simple fundamental things and trying to perfect them as much as we can.
When you say fundamentals, you're talking about really the technical skills, right? The movements in the water. Because I can't tell you how many times we've been running coach education clinics or coach conferences, and almost every time someone raised their hand and said, hey, can you show us what plays the senior team runs, or show us what tactics everybody's running at this high level? But what you're saying is you probably spend more time on those fundamentals and the technical skills than you do the tactical stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we beat teams, I feel like we beat teams just out fundamentaling them, you know? If that's even a word. Obviously it's not a word.
Just made it up.
But yeah,
it's all good.
I like the word.
Yeah.
A lot of it is the technical aspects. If you talk about skill development, it's that's how you're going to get better and improve in the skills, is like doing those fundamental things over and over again. But it also, fundamentals also can refer to tactics as well, just simple things,
Sure.
in terms of overall, you're playing perimeter defense, awareness of the center and your player, and the area that's around you, and the ball. I mean, those are fundamental things that are emphasized as well. And those are discussions that we're having, and I'm reminding the world's best players of those simple fundamental things, just like Joe Smith coaching a club team in Texas. It's really no different. It's how we do it, and how consistent we are with it that may separate us from others.
Yeah, I think one of the things that blew me away once I started coming to senior team, like film sessions, both on the men's and women's side and across the board, senior team, junior teams, is early on I thought that there would be some sort of discussion in the film about the execution of these plays, or how these kind of broader big picture stuff. And it's been really mind-blowing for the last several years to be in a film session with you guys and hearing, hey, you weren't swimming with your head up in transition. So when you weren't swimming with your head up, you missed what was happening next to you. It's like some really fundamental thing that you could hear a junior varsity coach, a 14 under coach, a 12 and under coach screaming out on their pool decks across the country. So if we're still dealing with it at the senior team level, right, it's important that we're dealing with it on all levels across the board.
Yeah, and that's a great tool, video. Video is such a great tool for that, right? Is to be able to see all of those fundamental things. We talk about it all the time, but these kids, senior team all the way down, they need to see themselves, and the video sessions that we have, I think, are sometimes just as valuable as the training sessions, for them to be able to see themselves and see those fundamentals in work, or where we want to go and what they want to look like moving forward, just to give them a picture and some visualization moving forward.
Yeah. So let me segue into another piece of kind of authenticity, right, and humility, which seems to kind of permeate from your team. There's this concept in business I was just reading about last week about violent politeness in the workplace, right, where we're so polite to each other, but we're not really being direct or candid with each other to get the job done. One thing that we noticed with your group, and that we've been that I think your group does a great job of, is being authentic and humble, but also being direct and honest with each other. That comes with that. Can you speak a little bit to how that translates into your performance, that ability to be honest and direct with each other?
Yeah, I think we're trying to, when you're building teams, it's about building relationships, and in order to build relationships, you need to build some trust and respect for one another. And the only way that trust and respect comes is through that kind of direct, honest communication. If you're not authentic, if you're trying to pretend like you're someone that you're not, then you'll never ever build. It'll all be surface level relationships, and you'll never build that connection and that trust and respect that is so crucial, especially when you get into tough situations, when you face adverse times. That's when you're that trust and respect is tested. And the time we spend together and the authenticity of that time is extremely important. That's not to say we're perfect. We're working to try to break those barriers and show even vulnerability at times. And from a coach's standpoint, this starts with me. I see many coaches, I feel like, make mistakes early on in their careers by trying to be someone they're not, instead of just being themselves and be open and honest. When you feel like you did something well, celebrate it. When you feel like you didn't do something well, say it. I mean, I told the team the other day that I did a horrible job. They need to hear that. That gives them an opportunity and some space to say, hey, I didn't do a good job either, and it emphasizes again this idea of being more process oriented as well, and just developing as people and as a team.
So our fourth takeaway from this experience was this idea of division of labor. So we talked about the high performance model and the different aspects that create the structure of the organization and the team and the system. But within that, taking it down to the micro level, how does a head coach divide the labor up? How do you empower everybody to do their role effectively for the benefit of the team?
Yeah, well, I think a few keys on that is one, one, you have to understand the strengths and maybe the challenges of your staff members as well, and kind of what fits them well, and you can put certain assistant coaches on certain parts of training or part of your team or strength training or whatever that they do well, so putting them in positions of success, but also putting them in positions to challenge. And I think one of our jobs as a head coach is to not just develop the athletes, but also help develop the staff members. And they all, as I mentioned before, they all have vital roles in the success of our team, and it's important that we're all working together because all these things are connected. So with that being said, when the team is, for instance, when the team is lifting weights, it's important for me to understand, and it's important for our strength coach to know what we're doing in the water to help him devise a plan that is going to work in accordance with what we're doing in the water. And when they're lifting weights, it's important that I show my face in there, and I know what they are doing in the weight room. It puts our strength coach in a better position to lead. I think that connection and how we divide and how we communicate as a staff about what our goals are, long-term goals, what our short-term goals are, what our goals are for each training session, allows our staff to work collectively to help put our athletes in the best position possible.
So it's like an empowerment of each of these staff members. It's really like an authentic empowerment of giving them their role, allowing them to do it, and supporting them in the process of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is I can't do it alone. I need the help of my whole staff in order for my staff to be the most effective. I need to put them in positions where they can have success, and I need to show respect for them, as I completely do. I need to show respect for them in their jobs, and because if I don't show the respect for them, then how are the athletes going to respect them? So when they are doing their jobs, even it's important that I'm attentive to what is going on. I'm in tune with that, because the athletes sniff that stuff out. If I have an assistant coach who's over on the side and working with the team about something, and I'm off talking on the phone, obviously that's not a good example. The athletes are going to go, well, this is not a very important drill that we're doing right now. And that connection and how that division of labor is and how effective we are dividing that, and knowing and understanding again what our goals are each and every day is really important for our success.
Our fifth and final takeaway and learning from this 2019 World League Super Final with Coach Krikorian and his team was this concept of prioritizing learning and teaching above all else. That the pool deck, everything you do as a team is essentially a mobile classroom, and prioritizing these things regardless of results, regardless of circumstances and situation, regardless of environment, and particularly thinking about the fact that winning can be such a poor teacher for us, and you've had a lot of success. So maybe you can speak to how you've been able to create this environment of keeping teaching and learning above all else, despite the success that you guys have had.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. It's I view myself as a teacher, again, like you said, above all else. I think it's easy for the outside world to judge us based on wins and losses, but that's honestly, we never speak about winning. Obviously, I think it goes without being said, you always want to try to win, and we're working towards that, but it is way more about what we're doing in the water, what we're doing in the weight room or in psychology sessions. And it's my job as an educator to teach them about the game of water polo, the game of life. And the thing that comes from that is when you have that approach, the one thing it does, it takes a little bit of pressure off as well, to be honest. When the approach is about learning and improving, and it's not just with the athletes, but it's for myself as well, then the process becomes way more enjoyable. If you're basing it just solely on success and results, then the wins may come, but they may not come as well. And it's hard to find the meaning of kind of what you're doing. And I think for all of us to have success, and in whatever we do, we need to find the purpose. We need to find the meaning. And when the purpose and the meaning is about just improving as athletes and as people, it just becomes easier to reach and become a little bit closer to your potential.
You referred to yourself as an educator and not a coach in the middle of this, and I think one of the most beautiful things about our sport, particularly in America, is that most coaches across the country, whether it's age group or high school or college, have an official educational role in their capacity. They're teachers who also then coach water polo in that sense. So a lot of these skills tend to translate, and I think it's important for all the coaches to hear that regardless if water polo is your full-time profession or not, that education and teaching is the priority even at your level.
It is, and sometimes honestly, sometimes I'll be the most upset after a win because we haven't reached our potential, right? Or we didn't play the way we're capable of playing,
which you were after the Italy game and the gold medal game in this tournament.
Right,
yeah.
right, and it obviously felt great to win and to qualify for the Olympics, but at the same time, and I said publicly, I was really disappointed with myself. I thought I coached a horrible game, and that kind of sits with me. I don't like that feeling. I don't think we played particularly well. I know we could play better. So it's amazing when you feel like you've given it your all and you've played your best, even if you come up short. There's a peace that you live with that is great. When you have success and you don't feel like you played up to your potential, it just doesn't sit with you well. So that's always an emphasis for us every single day. It's just about growing and improving and getting better. And again, it starts with me, and then it trickles down to the rest of the team.
Coaches, I hope you got something out of these 5 takeaways with Coach Krikorian, myself, Coach Education Manager Drew Clute, that we took away from Budapest, Hungary here. Just want you to understand that everything that we do here on the senior team level and the U.S. Water Polo all the way down is highly accessible to all of us. I encourage you guys to come to any trainings that we have with any pipeline teams, any senior team, all of these things influence and dictate what we do in the Olympic Development Program, influence what we do in our coach education program, influence all the materials and everything that we're putting out that are accessible to everyone across the country. So feel free to visit usawaterpolo.org. Under professional development, you'll be able to find our coaching manuals, you'll be able to find the mobile coaching app. Go on YouTube, our high performance education YouTube page with all these videos and more to continue to help ourselves become better coaches, because the better we become as coaches, the better our athletes are, the better the entire system is, the better off our sport is in America. So thank you.